Good day! Welcome to our Grade 7 Mathematics class for Quarter 1, Week 3. I am Ma'am Julie, your mathematics teacher for today's episode of our Teaching on Air. Today, I will discuss absolute value and integers. And for our learning objectives, after going through this lesson, you are expected to represent the absolute value of the number line as the distance of number from 0 and perform fundamental operation on integers. Let's define first what is absolute value. An absolute value of a number is the distance from the given number on the number line from 0. The absolute value of a number disregards the direction from where it lies with respect to 0. And when we talk about distance, it is always positive. Number line is a line or infinite extent whose points correspond to the real numbers according to their distance in a positive or negative direction from a point taken as 0. The points from 0 extending to its right are all positive numbers, while the points from 0 extending to its left are all negative numbers. Let's have an illustrative example number 1 on your module. Represent the absolute value of 6 on the number line. Again, the absolute value is the distance from the given number on the number line from 0. So the distance of 6 from 0 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Therefore, the absolute value of 6 is 6. An illustrative example number 2 at your module. Represent the absolute value of negative 4 on the number line. So the distance of negative 4 from 0 is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. Let's have an illustrative example number 3. Represent the absolute value of negative 5 plus the absolute value of 3 on the number line. The absolute value of negative 5 from 0 is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, while the absolute value of 3 from 0 is 1, 2, and 3. The distance of negative 5 from 0 is 5, and 3 is 3 units from 0. Thus, the absolute value of negative 5 plus the absolute value of 3 is equal to 5 plus 3. Then the answer is 8. Let's have an illustrative example number 4 on your module. What is the value of negative of absolute value of negative 5? When a negative sign appears before the absolute sign, this will mean you are taking the inverse or opposite value, thus leading to a negative number. So, the absolute value of negative 5 is 5, and the negative sign appears before the absolute sign, so this will mean you are taking the inverse or opposite value. So, the opposite or inverse of 5 is negative 5. Thus, the value of negative of absolute value of negative 5 is negative 5. Let's have addition of integers. In addition of integers, we have two rules. For rule number 1, to add integers with same sign, add their absolute values and use the common sign for the sum. And for rule number 2, to add integers with different sign, subtract the absolute value. The result has the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value. Let's have examples. For example, number 1 to 5 are integers with same sign. Remember the rule number 1. To add integers with same sign, add their absolute value and use the common sign for the sum. So for example, number 1, we have 3 plus 7. So the answer is 10. Then use the common sign, which is positive. If the sign is positive, we don't need to write positive sign. Example number 2. If we have negative 5 plus negative 3, so add the number, we have 8, and use the common sign, which is negative. For example number 3, we have negative 8 plus negative 2. So add the number, we have 10, and use the common sign, which is negative. And for example number 4, we have 2 plus 8. Then we have positive 10. Again, if the sign is positive, we don't need to write positive sign. For example number 5, we have negative 6 plus negative 3. Add the number, we have 9, and use the common sign, which is negative. For our example number 6 to 10 are integers with different signs. Remember our rule number 2, to add integers with different signs, subtract their absolute values. The result has the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value. For our example number 6, we have 3 plus negative 7, so subtract the number. 7 minus 3 is 4. Then use the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value, which is negative 7, so we have negative 4. And for example number 7, we have negative 4 plus 6, so subtract the integers or the number. 6 minus 4 is 2. Then use the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value, which is positive 6, so we have positive 2. Again, if the answer is positive, we don't need to write the positive sign. And for example number 8, we have negative 17 plus 2. So subtract the number. 17 minus 2 is 15. Then use the sign of the greater absolute value, which is negative 17. So we have negative 15. And for our example number 9, we have 12 plus negative 5. So subtract the number. 12 minus 5 is 7. Then use the sign of the greater absolute value, which is positive 12. So therefore, our answer is positive 7. And for example number 10, we have negative 6 plus 18. Subtract the number. 18 minus 6, we have 12. Then use the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value, which is positive 18. So we have positive 12. Next, we have subtraction of integers. Rule: change the operation into addition and then change the sign of the subtrahend. Once changed, apply what you've learned in adding integers. Remember this KCC, which means you have to keep, change, and change. And for our example, we have to remember this, the KCC, which means you have to keep, change, and change. So for example number 1, we have 15 minus negative 8. So we have to keep 15. We have to change negative into positive. negative 8 become positive 8. Then, apply the rule in adding integers. So we have 15 plus 8 is equal to 23. Then number 2, we have negative 9. So we have to keep that, negative 9. Next, we have minus or negative become positive or plus. Then we have positive 4, so change, negative 4. Then apply the rule in adding integers. So add the number 9 plus 4 is 13. And use the common sign is negative. So we have negative 13. For example, number 3, we have negative 8 minus negative 2. So we have to keep negative 8, then change, and change. Now, apply the rule in integers. So we have different signs. So subtract the number. 8 minus 2 is 6. Then, use the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value, which is negative 8. So we have negative 6. And for example, number 4, we have 7 minus 10. So we have to keep, change, and change. Then apply the rule in adding integers. So we have different signs. So subtract the number. 10 minus 7 is 3. And use the sign of the greater absolute value. We have negative 10. So we have negative 3. And for example number 5, we have 25 minus 12. So we have to keep 25. Then change, and change. Then apply the rule in adding integers. So they have different signs, so subtract the number. 25 minus 12 is 13. And use the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value, which is positive 25. So we have positive 13. That's all for today's episode, class. I hope you learned something. Happy learning!